the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Our outlook on where this team can go in the tournament, because you're thinking Final Four.
Sure.
We're all Final Four.
I like it. Let's do a season grade here. Here this offseason. I was talking to somebody today about this in depth, and I'm curious where you land on these two, Landon. So, season grade, Nico Iamaleava in the quarterback position for Tennessee. Now that you've had over a month and a half, it's already crazy that we're that far removed from Tennessee's season being over. But now you've had that much time to reflect. What kind of grade would you give the quarterback room and Nico's performance in 2024?
I think a B.
Okay.
I think that's. I mean, you won 10 games. Like it's. I don't think we can go and just put super high expectations because of what Hendon Hooker did in 1 year. I mean, look where Tennessee was before Hendon Hooker. We would die for a player like Nico to go win us 10 games. It doesn't have to be the prettiest. We just want to win 10 games. And he was able to do that as a redshirt freshman. I don't think he had a ton of help offensive line and wide receiver wise. So yeah, I think a solid B. I mean, you don't beat Alabama without Nico Iamaleava. So that's a huge feather in Nico's cap that he probably doesn't really care to mention, but I'm going to mention it for him if he won't. So I think a solid B.
I like it. I think that's fair. What about you, Caleb?
Yeah, I was actually on the cusp of B plus and A minus. That Alabama win that Landon mentioned, that bumps it up. It probably would have bumped it up to an A, but you had those periods with lack of output in the offense that I don't think you can't give the most important position on the field, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I think an A, when you look at those games, your defense won you a lot or kept you in games during those spells. And I think he did a lot of things well. I think he still struggled like you expect a redshirt freshman to. You didn't want to expect a guy like Nico to do it, but it's just part of it. And I think he's still got a ways to go, as noted. And I think it's a whole team. It's not just him, but looking at the Georgia game, for example, the place you look that you want to be, a program that's been so stout lately. So I think he's still got a ways to go, but I think that Alabama win puts it just on the cusp of an A minus, and I've got a B plus for him.
I think y'all might be a little bit higher than me. I think I might go B minus.
Okay.
I think there were some positives, especially down the stretch. Like second half of the Alabama game on, I think he was a B plus, A minus. But you also can't really discount what you saw early on this year. And I mean, obviously he put up some good numbers against Kent State and Chattanooga and things like that. Like that was, and early on, like he flashed a little bit. Some good throws in those games. But he didn't start running until really the Georgia game, and that's when things kind of clicked a little bit more with this offense. Is like I think you just can't be a functional quarterback in the Heupel scheme if you're not using your legs constantly as a quarterback. I think that's something that I hope changes for the full 2025 season, because you saw, I mean, how he first person on the scene, like he was running all over Iowa, a good defense. Like that's the best version of Nico, is a Nico that is running often. It doesn't mean he has to be a run first quarterback, but it doesn't mean he has to take these terrible hits. Cause I mean, he cracks his helmet and he was taking like slide, like Hendon Hooker was able to avoid a lot of bad shots too. Like that's what you have to do. I think it hopefully kind of set in there that like, hey, this has to be part of it. You can't play scared. You have to take off when things aren't there, especially with the kind of receivers and the situation that he was faced with down the stretch this year. I mean, you have Braylon Staley, who I think is going to be a good player in the slot. I mean, he played 50 snaps in the Ohio State game because you were just so destroyed there with depth with the portal and injuries and whatnot. So I think that Nico showed some flashes. I think he's very accurate with the football. Interceptions were an issue for him, which is important, obviously, in the scheme. But he also wasn't throwing guys open. He had some bad misses. Sometimes it was on Nico. Sometimes it was on Nimrod. And other receivers dropping balls. Sometimes it was guys just not getting open. Sometimes it was pass protection not being good enough to give Nico enough time to do stuff. So it's hard to figure out just where Nico ultimately was responsible in terms of the offense being 94th in passing and conference play this year. But I think he has to take a huge step because the expectations are high for him for a reason. I mean, he was a 5-star projected first-round pick. Those were 5 stars is they have 32 a year because they're projected, if all things go right, they're a first-round quarterback. And we didn't see somebody who looked like a first-round quarterback last year. I think that still can change this year. I absolutely think that he can get there this year. But in terms of what we saw last year, I think it's enough to be like, it's not a DJU disaster type situation, but it's also not like he's a clear Heisman guy next year. He's Bryce Young, like a big Bryce Young, which is what the hope was, right? Like he's just a big version of that. And I think you've seen some flashes, but you didn't see that consistency. And I think this year is so big for him to, like, he's going to have to throw guys open. He's gotten a lot more snaps than Mike has, a lot more snaps than Braylon Staley has, a lot more snaps than Ethan Davis, who's going to get a lot more run at tight end has. He's going to have a freshman right tackle. He's going to have a new running game, Peyton Lewis, who's going to be asked to step in. We'll see what Deshaun Bishop's health looks like. So much is going to fall on Nico to be the leader, to be the guy who makes plays for other people, the guy that is the engine and runs all of this. And it doesn't have to be Hendon Hooker, but it does have to be a really good player for Tennessee to win one of these games that they have not won yet in the Heupel era and get back to the CFP. There's no way around it. So I think he's graded on a more difficult curve for me because the talent is there and because there are fair expectations based on his pedigree and his ability. I think it's just you have to grade him a little bit differently than everybody else, and I think he has to be a lot better for Tennessee's offense to avoid some of the issues they had a season ago. Is that fair?
I think all of that was fair. The only pushback I would maybe do about early on in the year is, and I think the NC State game is a good example. He didn't let those mistakes eat him up that I think a lot of young quarterbacks do. I think he showed maturity there. And I do think he was, I mean, you talked about how much better he was from the Alabama game on. That's when he started. You're right that you didn't see much of it until later on, but he started using his legs against Alabama. It was finally like, okay, he sees the field now and knows what he has to do. So I think all of that is completely fair. But I do think even in those bye wins and at NC State, or not at NC State, but against NC State, I think that was it wasn't like he's our guy moment for me, but I was like, he's gonna do okay. And we'll see if he improves from here, but he's not just a disaster like a DJU, like you mentioned.
I think that's fair. I also just, he just has to be a whole lot better. And
I agree. For this offense to be anywhere near even, especially 2022, but I mean, even close to the levels that it was at times at 23. I mean, he's got to be a lot better. I
mean, they were shut out for a month straight in the first half, and he was the quarterback. Like, it doesn't mean it all falls on him, but that did happen. Like, that was something where we were looking around like, is this going to get fit? Like, they were just, they couldn't score. They couldn't. Some of it was Nico would fumble. Some of it was Samson would fumble. You moved down the field a little bit. There was a multitude of reasons, and it all doesn't fall at the feet of Nico. But it's a quarterback-driven league. It's a quarterback-driven sport now. He's the 5-star pedigree guy for a reason. He's now in year 3. He wasn't a true freshman. We've seen true freshmen come in and thrive. It doesn't mean it has to be that way, but he did have a year to learn. This was year 2. It's a big year 3 for him. I just think you have to look at him differently, and I think you have to. It's fair to have very sky high expectations for him based on everything that came in, the time he's had, and just the situation that Tennessee's in. He just has to. He has to be a lot better.
Well, and like he was given the starting quarterback job as soon as that bowl game. Like you were going to be the starter next year, no matter what. I feel like next year, like if he struggles this year, next year that's not a for sure thing anymore. Tennessee's continuing to get talent in here in that quarterback room where, you're not going to the job isn't going to be handed to you anymore. Now, I do think it is a big season where there's no more, he's a young quarterback. That's out the window. I mean, that's over with. And you've seen guys that take that. It took a little bit to get that next step. Like Cade Klubnik last year was fantastic. The year before, they're like, oh, this guy's the same guy as DJU. Cam Ward. I mean, some of the best quarterbacks in the country last year. It took a little bit of time for them to become Shedeur Sanders. Like Shedeur Sanders was throwing on. They were playing like Jackson State. Like it wasn't like he was just throwing on SEC teams. Now he got to Colorado and blew it up, and now he's going to be one of the top quarterbacks taken. Cam Ward was at Incarnate Word, and then he went to Washington State, and then he became who he was. Like I think it takes a little bit of time for some quarterbacks to kind of see that. I mean, obviously you have, DJ Lagway. Everybody's like expectations are through the roof, and it's kind of like Nico. The beginning of last year, you thought you saw him in Iowa, but you saw a little bit of DJ Lagway a little bit more toward the end of the season. But I mean, it wasn't like he was fantastic when he was going in for Graham Mertz. It took a little bit for him to get going too. Lenora Sellers was inconsistent this year too. He looked horrible in the bowl game. So
yeah,
I agree with what you're saying. Is like he needs to take a step. And
I think it might be 3 steps.
Yeah. But it's all on him. Like this is a money year for you. If you really want to be like the top quarterback taken, like this is the year to do it, or you're probably not gonna be.
I think this is, I don't know if y'all agree on this, but I think one or the other happens. Either Nico breaks out and he's a first round quarterback and he has a Heisman type year and he's in New York and gone. Or it's another year, kind of like last year, where it's just not clean. The wide receivers don't break through. You take a step back with the running game without Sampson, and the defense does enough to keep you to 9-3, 10-2, but the offense is still just kind of just in and out, very inconsistent, different things. And I just don't see him in the portal era being back and running. I don't think Tennessee runs it back that way for 3 straight years. I think this is a blank or get off the pot type year for Tennessee's offense, because it's now, I mean, half of your tenure with Heupel, who has raised the floor, obviously has been the first 2 years was all offense. The defense was getting their guys, and they lost so many dudes, and they're gradually getting better and better. Then the last 2 has just been the defense is carrying you. The defense is getting better and better, and I think the defense is going to be even better this year. I think they could absolutely be top 7 in scoring defense this year. It wouldn't surprise me at all nationally. They're going to have dudes. I think they're going to be stacked all throughout this defense. I'm excited about linebacker. I'm excited about the defensive line. They're going to be great. Offense, like if you don't have a great year, that's 3 out of your 5, and with an offensive coach that were not good. And look, Heupel deserves credit for winning games and finding ways to win, even with offensive issues. But I don't know. This is just such a gigantic year for the offense, because you didn't make any changes to the staff on the offensive side. Like you're betting on internal development and internal staffers to fix this. And I think it's fair to say the offense has to be fixed, because the offense had real problems for the majority of last season. And to pretend otherwise, I think, does a disservice to what this defense has built and what the expectations are with the way Tennessee's recruiting and what they've like. It's easier to get from bad to good than it is from good to elite. And right now they're fighting to get to elite, and it's hard, but to get to that elite point, the offense has to make significant strides. And the only way for the offense to make significant strides is Nico's got to be a Heisman type guy. If he's not, then Tennessee's not.
Yeah, because that a receiver, I mean, they could have some breakout guys, and hope they do, but they don't have a Jeremiah Smith where he can just throw it up to him. They don't have.
That's where Nico comes in, throwing guys open.
Well,
he's got to be the one.
I do believe it's more on Nico than it is the receivers, but I also think the receivers, I think the biggest thing that's got to change for this group from 2024 and 2023. The drops have got to get better. We're not asking, and I don't think Heupel's asking for the Jeremiah Smith, but you do need the guys to make plays when the ball arrives, and I think that changes a lot. I still think Nico would have to improve to get to where that next step's there. Whether that be hosting, winning the first round, maybe potentially a bye by winning the SEC. You still have to improve the quarterback position, but I think there is a lot of room for improvement with wide receivers without saying we've got one of the best single wide. We don't need a blitz.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.